Good afternoon, Ms. Rivers. Can you hear me?
Yes, Judge, I can hear you.
Great. We're going to get started. This is 19 SC 166924, State versus Jerry Hodges. Mr. Hodges is here. Good afternoon, Mr. Hodges. I'm doing okay. How about you?
I'm doing fine.
Good. Mr. Hodges is here with his attorney, Mr. Franklin. And, representing the state is Ms. Love, who is, according to an email of hers that we'll be talking about in a minute, now and forevermore, the person handling the Jerry Hodges case. So we've got the right prosecutor in the room. I know Mr. Abate had been involved in the past, and who knows who else. Mr. Pinion as well. But it's Ms. Love's matter. And we are here today, in theory, to hear evidence and argument on a motion that Mr. Franklin filed in January of this year to suppress identification testimony. Mr. Hodge was allegedly, is it Hodge or Hodges? S, no S.
Hodges.
Yes, S?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Mr. Hodges was allegedly picked out of a photo lineup in January of 2 years ago, 2019, which in and of itself might not be so remarkable, except that the crime alleged in the indictment is from 2007. So it was almost 12 years after the fact that a witness identified Mr. Hodges from the lineup. We tried to do this once before, and there is an officer from another jurisdiction outside of Georgia, and I'll let the lawyers get into this in much greater detail. That officer had a family issue he needed to work through. In case it weren't clear at the time that Mr. Franklin was requiring that this witness, or whatever witness it might be, it could be the eyewitness, it could be law enforcement. It sounds like the state wants to move forward with law enforcement. In case there was any question about the defendant's willingness to waive his right to directly confront, i.e. cross-examine in person the witness, that was made clear back in March. That Mr. Franklin, on behalf of Mr. Hodges, wanted the officer, I think it's Montiel, M-O-N-T-I-E-L, to be here in person, which puts a burden on the state because this person needs to be flown in, but it is the state's burden to prove up the identification. So Ms. Nelson set this out many months from March all the way to May, almost 2 months out. And today at 1:30 was when we were to begin. Ms. Love asked for a few minutes. I thought that's because the witness was running late, but it sounds like it's a little more complicated than that. So that is my preamble as to where we are. Mr. Franklin, I'll let you get us started. And then, of course, I'll hear from Ms. Love, and we'll figure out how we're going to proceed today.
I guess what I have to say, Your Honor, is that as is my practice, I don't typically waive the presence of a witness for an evidentiary hearing. If it were a 911 operator just authenticating a phone call or something like that, I probably wouldn't make as large of a deal about it in the context of a trial where we had several other witnesses or something. But being that the purpose of this particular motion filed was about talking to the officers about the way the lineup was conducted, but additionally, the way that the photos were selected. I wanted the officers present, as we have a right to demand per our constitutional right to confrontation.
Do you know, just as an aside, if, and this may have been what we would have learned, if Officer Montiel prepared the lineup or simply administered it because Zimbrick or whomever, there were cold case detectives who, if they said, here is our lineup or our array, please administer it.
Detective Zimbrick from the Atlanta Police Department put it together.
Okay.
Per the reports that I've read thus far. He got in contact with a third party in Buffalo Grove There was an email exchange between Detective Zembrick and D. Shipman. I think D maybe for Doug. I have D. Shipman at vbg.org. He let him know that he was sending a package addressed to Commander Tom Reed and gave him a rundown of the case. My concern, of course, is that with a, albeit brief, summary being given of the case, that there was more that was in the consciousness of the officers who were going to administer the lineup in Illinois. So I wanted to talk to him about that in person, talk to Detective Zembrick about that in person, and also question Detective Zembrick about which photos were selected and why they were selected, because I thought those were problematic as well. Being that we're at a situation where Detective Montiel is not present, Detective Zembrick's not present, this is our second attempt at the motion. We understand it's the state's burden, and we would ask that the motion be granted to suppress the identification of Jerry Hodges by Kristen Canada.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Love.
Thank you, Your Honor. I don't know if the court prefers I stand here or go in front.
I prefer that Ms. Rivers be able to hear you. As long as she can hear you, you can be wherever you want to be.
And I've been vaccinated, but I can put on my mask.
I'm good if it makes it easier for folks to hear you. You're good.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Franklin is correct in that he and I did communicate before the last hearing. We were set to have Detective Montiel flown in as per Mr. Franklin's conversation with me before that hearing. And I did ask for and received a continuance that allowed now Sergeant Montiel the opportunity to handle a family matter. I did not intend to bring in Detective Zembrick. Detective Montiel was the only one that I intended as the lineup that was shown either is or is not unduly suggestive, and either Detective Montiel did or did not suggest to the witness whom she needed to identify. The communication regarding today's hearing date is one that eluded my attention until I realized that we needed to be before the court. I literally just came back from another witness meeting. And as I tried to get Detective Montiel on the link, Mr. Franklin reminded me that he had objected to a virtual hearing. And Your Honor, at this time, as Mr. Franklin does well within his rights object to a virtual hearing, I would ask that the court afford me until tomorrow a one-day continuance to have Detective Montiel here for the motion to suppress hearing.
I want to make sure the record is clear. I think you were being a little euphemistic, but when you said, Ms. Love, that the scheduling eluded your attention, it was something to that effect.
I did not realize today was the date for this hearing, and that's where it ends. I'm not being euphemistic. I did not I did not realize that today was that date.
Okay, and that's what I guess I thought you meant. You're not suggesting that notice wasn't timely provided. The calendar was published whenever the calendar was published. Let me see. Well, I'll find out, but I want the record to be real clear.
I'm not saying that.
Good, okay, just that you're not saying you were ready to have the sergeant present if only someone had told you of the hearing date.
No.
Okay, good.
No. At the last hearing, I was prepared to have him here for his issue.
And then whenever these calendars were published, which is usually 3 or more weeks in advance, you, in theory, had noticed that it was going to be time to get Detective Montiel here. It looks like April 15th is when the nation's calendar went out for Mr. Hodges' case. So not quite a month ago, but 5 days shy of that. And for whatever reason, I'm not asking you to justify it. That didn't trigger on the district attorney's office in April 15th, May 10th. Let's make sure we get the sergeant here on May 10th.
Right, I missed that
Okay.
calendar.
All right. And so your request is bump it 1 day, not another cycle of 2-3 months, and you will move heaven and earth to get Sergeant Montiel here tomorrow.
Yes. And if Mr. Franklin desires that I have Detective Zembrick here as well.
Well, that's for you two. You've got your burden, and if you think you can prove it up with Sergeant Montiel, you don't need to have anyone else here. Mr. Franklin, you've got your own schedule. What does your tomorrow look like? If we were able to get Mr. Hodges back here, I don't know that we can. I'm going to need to talk with Ms. Nelson. Do you have conflicts tomorrow, or would you be able to be here?
I need to check what time it is. I think I have 12 people.
You do in the morning. Well, we've got the presiding bond calendar. I don't think you have to mess with that. That's unindicted cases. And then we have, let me open this up. There's a final plea calendar.
Yeah. So I spoke
But
with
you don't, I don't mean to speak for you. Well, you do have one, a Katrina Smith. Boy, we have a lot of calendars tomorrow. And then there's a plea from Justice LaGrua's docket that I'm taking. That's it. So you would have in the morning that one item. What is your day otherwise open if we can get Mr. Hodges here?
yeah, it was just
Okay. All right. Anything you want to add, Ms. Love?
Nothing beyond what I've said, and yes, that I will move heaven and earth if the court permits me this.
Do you know how to fly? Will you be flying out there together? Okay. All right. Well, let me ask this before I engage with Ms. Nelson offline about what it would look like if we could do it tomorrow. Do you have reason to believe that you could get Sergeant Montiel here tomorrow, so that we're not moving things around and having Mr. Franklin change his schedule and dragging Mr. Hodges back here, only to learn that, you know what, there were no Delta seats or whatever?
Well,
Or put differently, has Sergeant Montiel told you, yeah, if you send me a ticket, I'll get on the plane?
To get him here tomorrow. That's
Okay.
it. He did not tell me that, and I intended to come hell or high water to get him here.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Mr. Franklin, anything you want to add?
I don't think so, Your Honor. I stand on my argument that I made initially.
Sure. Did you have reason to believe that Detective Zembrick would be here, or you would like to ask him questions had the state called him?
I had anticipated questioning him.
But you didn't subpoena him and he declined to show up. You just thought that the state might have a two-step presentation, Zembrick and Montiel.
Correct.
Okay. All right. So I'm not going to require Ms. Love that you produce any other witnesses than what you think is sufficient to make your showing. I am going to ask that you spend the next few minutes with whoever your logistical people are, and let Ms. Nelson and Mr. Franklin know if Sergeant Montiel can be here tomorrow. He may tell you I can't because XYZ. Delta may tell you he can't because there are no flights. There are a host of reasons why it may not be possible. If it is possible, and we can figure out where to put it tomorrow, then we'll do it. If it's not possible, then I think that Mr. Franklin is well within his rights to ask for this form of relief. I think that he's been flexible in this case and others when confronted with changing circumstances on the other side. And I understand what happened on your part. I don't think any of this was willful. It's just these things happen. But that's not Mr. Hodges' problem, as you fully understand. So why don't you get back to Mr. Franklin and Ms. Nelson? It's 2:15 now. I'm not going to put a real tight deadline on it, but it seems like if you don't know by 3:30 whether he can be here, he's probably not going to be here. And that's what you should send is I can't reach him, or his supervisor said he's on leave, or whatever the deal is. But let's look for an email to Mr. Franklin and Ms. Nelson by 3:30. We'll do a little outreach as to when it might happen tomorrow. And Mr. Hodges, I know you get woken up early when you're brought over here and all that. It may happen again tomorrow if they're able to get this detective, I guess now sergeant, from Illinois. If you're not brought over tomorrow, you're going to want to reach out to Mr. Franklin. He'll give you an update as to how this played out. Okay. You should understand that if I deny if I grant the your lawyer's motion, doesn't mean your case necessarily goes away. It means that it'll be a different kind of conversation that Mr. Franklin would have with the prosecutor. But granting the motion doesn't mean that the charges are dismissed. Okay?
Understand.
Mr. Franklin, do you have anything else you want to cover at this time?
The thing that's going back and forth in my head, but I'm not even certain if I want to address it today or potentially address it tomorrow in the event that Detective Montiel is not able to be present. Mr. Hodges is currently still on no bond status. And I'm not sure if I guess that would be appropriate to address today since we're coming back tomorrow. But in the event that we're not able to have court tomorrow, then I certainly wouldn't want to still be in no bond status.
My thought is that we see how this dynamic plays out about your motion, and is it going to be heard or will it be, in essence, granted by default? And if it's the latter, then I think we'd want to set up a separate hearing in short order to address your bond question. It may prompt other types of discussions between you and the state anyway. But it would not be inappropriate to say, Judge, we're back on bond if the motion were granted.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Ms. Love, I don't want to keep you here any longer. That's fine. I'm presiding, so there may be people coming in and out, but they won't bother you, and you can do what you need to do. And I'll just look for something from Ms. Nelson by 3:30. And Mr. Franklin, if you haven't heard, reach out to Ms. Nelson, see if she's heard. But I won't keep anyone hanging beyond 3:30. We need to get an update from Ms. Love by then, whatever that update may be.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, Mr. Hodges, it was good seeing you. I may see you tomorrow. If I don't see you tomorrow, then I bet you and Mr. Franklin are going to be talking about what's next, okay?
Your Honor, will the court keep the Zoom link open, or do I need to, will the court close the Zoom link?
I'm going to close the Zoom link.